Welcome back to Momentous Struggle, a Star Wars Shatterpoint podcast. On this week's episode, I'm joined by the lovely, beautiful, talented, and amazing Michael Plummer. How we doing, Michael?
Hey man, I'm good. I'm good. Thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on the show.
Yeah, it's great to have you back again. I'm excited to sit there and talk with you. I know you've already been on like two other maybe plus podcasts at this point in time and probably talked about like all of the things to do around with the balance pass and everything along those lines. So we'll probably touch on that a little bit as I ask you some questions, but I think I wanted to dive more into like your philosophy and kind of and things along those lines along the way. So
Great. Happy
do,
to talk about whatever you want, whatever questions you've got for me. I'm here for you.
Sweet, sweet. Well, for those who maybe haven't heard it before, can you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us why I think you're so wonderful.
Yeah. So I'm Michael Plummer. I am the game development manager over here at Atomic Mass Games, which means it's my job to help kind of shepherd all of the other game developers as they work on all of the products that everybody out there in the world, all the games everybody loves to play. We just kind of keep everything moving and working as a team, and I'm also the lead developer on Star Wars Shatterpoint.
Sweet, sweet. So you have your hands in like every game though, not just
Yeah,
Shatterpoint.
so the one of the wonderful things about being a dev at Atomic Mass Games is we are very collaborative, and actually everyone kind of has their hands in all of the cookie pots. So everybody works on every game, everybody tests everything, and everybody's included in all of the discussions. But we do, of course, have lead developers who kind of have like final say, and someone's got to be in charge of steering the ship.
And you are that captain. Oh, captain, my captain.
For Shatterpoint, yes, I am.
Well,
So
that's
to speak.
fantastic. Fantastic. Well, like I said, I'm super excited to have you here. I mean, like I said, I always enjoy talking with you
Yeah,
and getting to spend more time looking at your wonderful face and everything along those lines.
sure.
But yeah, I'm sure people want to actually hear like some of the insight that you have. So I guess I can just jump right into it. One of the first things I wanted to talk about was the idea of power creep. So as games go on, I mean, you have to develop things and the development of characters change and with the ebb and flow of that. So as a designer, what do you do to kind of keep that idea of power check in place, like our power creep in place like that, so that it doesn't get out of control as you're developing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a certain level of power creep that's sort of inevitable, just from the fact that as you continue to work on a game, as you continue to play in any sandbox, even if you think about your own job or your own work or your own hobbies, the things that you do, you're always going to want to push the envelope at some point. Try something new, try something different, put something out into the meta that is different, that plays differently, that does something wild, and sometimes your best efforts at making it perfectly balanced, as we know perfect balance cannot exist, and sometimes you end up just kind of like raising that curve and doing something that's a little much, and then you do it again and you do it again, and you don't always necessarily do it on purpose. I think that developers and even testers get excited about how cool something is, how fun something is to do, and like, yeah, maybe it's a little too good, but it's so fun, so like, yeah, we got to do this, and I think that's very natural. I think it's part of the passion and the excitement of making games. But of course, it becomes a problem over time. It's not something I think that is felt in the immediate. I mean, I think that you can definitely know that like it has happened, and you can look at something from like a year and a half into the life of a game and say like, well, this is definitely a little bit stronger than the stuff that was there at the beginning. And I think it happens with pretty much every game. I can't really think of any game in my recent memory that has not had that happen at some point. Um, and I think that there's a lot you can do to try and keep it in check. Like obviously, you play test and you try your best to not let those things happen. But then I think there's these ideas of these kind of balance updates that, like the one that we've just done, they're just a really good opportunity to stop and recalibrate and say like, okay, what have we done? And what do we need to either undo, or where do we need to lift something up? And I think that there's a lot of different philosophy about like what is the right direction to do that in. And I think it's very popular to say like no nerfs, only buffs. People love that idea, but I think the idea of no nerfs, only buffs is really just kind of what leads you to power creep. And there are places where you're going to need to trim at times. It's tough. I mean, it's really hard because you never want to take away something that people are enjoying and having fun playing, because obviously the point of the game is to have fun. Like the object of the game is to win. The point is to have fun. And when you take away things that are fun to do, that are fun to play, that can feel bad. But you just kind of need to think about it like you're not taking things away, you're just pulling them back, and really just kind of look at everything very holistically. But yeah, I think balance updates are a great way to kind of hold power creep in check, and also just like there's a certain point where you just have to be okay with it. You just need to accept that like something is going to be the best, and it is okay that that thing is the best, and it will be the best until it is no longer the best.
Yeah.
And that is what it is. Every game has something that's the best.
Oh yeah. I mean that's unavoidable. Like, that's always going to happen. I mean, and it's
But
unless everything's the same, and then it's just boring.
yeah, and you also just kind of have to hope that like the best thing isn't just the most recent thing that came out. Like every time, like
Yeah.
that's bad. Don't do that.
Fair enough. So I mean, you did talk about like not trying to avoid nerfing things. And one of the things I kind of noticed well through a lot of the updates, especially within the primaries anyway, was you kind of updated the identities. And how is it that you can go about like balancing those with the identities and balancing the characters, the original idea of the design, maybe the lore of them, along with the evolving these identities to match that?
It's it depends on the character. Sometimes you go very theme forward, and sometimes you just kind of look at the mechanics. So like if I'm talking about Anakin Skywalker, we wanted to go very theme forward on that one. A lot of the playtest feedback was that he didn't move other characters, so he didn't feel like a general, and that was kind of what we heard overwhelmingly is that people really wanted him to feel like the hero, like he was leading his troops into battle. And so we took a very theme forward approach on his identity specifically to make sure that like so kind of like the long story short of what happened is we were like, okay, fine, we'll let him move someone, and we gave him a tactic where he got to move someone at the start of his turn, and it like turbo busted the game, and like I still don't understand why. I don't know what happened, but it was not okay. But by putting it into the identity and amplifying it, like that let us make it a much more move. Obviously, this is more than moving one person, but you have to earn it. So it's very much like it feels very good because Anakin gets to go and be the hero. His activation happens. He finds someone. He takes them out, and he gets a little bacon, and that feels very good. But then if you looked at like the changes to Asajj, we knew that Asajj was not very popular. People weren't playing Asajj, and part of that was the identity. Part of it was that the identity felt very feast or famine. Like if you do the right thing, great. Otherwise, Asajj activates and does some stuff, but like you don't always feel like you got something out of it. And now, as long as you can have Asajj wound someone, anyone, you get something out of it. So it feels like you're rewarded just for drawing the card and activating Asajj. Asajj can usually find someone to wound or at least put herself in a really solid position. And if you're in a really solid position, that's going to feel good. And if you wound someone and get that force refresh and possibly more because you wounded the right person, that feels good. So it was really just kind of a question of like, we really want it to feel good when you draw your primary character. Your primary unit gets drawn and you get to activate them. It should always be this moment of like, oh yeah, it's my primary unit. Here we go. This is it. It should never feel like, oh darn, I pulled them. Well, that's not good. Unless it's like, let me reserve that because it'll be great later. You don't want the primary unit to be the one that you're like dreading pulling. You really don't want to dread pulling any of the characters in a perfect world, but that's not always the world that we live in.
Right. Exactly. So that's interesting. I mean, like to kind of, I guess, a little bit more. You said like how Anakin, you were really theme focused with him. Asajj, not so much. Was there a character that like the theme focus just wasn't getting there, and you kind of had to move away from that? I know I'm catching you off guard with this question. Sorry.
No, 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 that's fine. It's a perfectly good follow up. I think I can honestly say no. I think if we really keep the theme and the like the canon, the characters, like if we keep the idea that the character needs to feel like the character, which is so subjective, so like even saying that feels weird. Pardon me. That usually keeps it's a pretty good north star as far as like making sure that things don't get out of hand or feel wrong.
Mhm.
Like maybe not such a great north star for making sure things don't get out of hand because sometimes things get out of hand because we follow too closely. You turn on Clone Wars and people are like jumping over buildings and stuff, right? Um, So like it gets pretty crazy, but it helps us to like at least keep it feeling right. And then we can tweak numbers. That's fine.
Makes sense. Makes sense. All right. Well, so moving on to like you talked a lot, like a little bit about the play testers there, and I've heard that come up in other conversations about the importance of utilizing play testers because of course you only have so many hours in the day for you and the staff at AMG to do play testing as well. So can you share a little bit more about like how that relationship works, how that dynamic works back and forth, and have
Yeah,
you ever had like the playtesters, I guess, bring ideas to the table that you hadn't thought of or your team hadn't thought of that shift
yeah,
your thinking?
for sure. Happy to talk about that a little bit. So playtest is the way that playtest works is that we have groups that play games for us, and then they come. We have a forum that we talk to them on, where they give us reports of their games and give their feedback on the new stuff that we're working on, and we share, our files of what we're working on so that they can play it ahead of time and tell us what they think so that we can then iterate on. And it's that cycle and churn of like they play it, they tell us what they think, we take that feedback, we change what we're working on, we shift things, we move the numbers, change the widgets, we completely rewrite stuff sometimes, which is the worst, but sometimes you have to do it. And then we just continue that going on. And there's also this whole section that's kind of separate from the reports themselves, but it's just this ongoing discussion where we're like, if we're working on new units, like if we were working on like Luminara and Grievous, we'd have a thread for like Luminara, give us your feedback, and Grievous, discuss here, right? And people are always coming in with like their hot take and their crazy idea, and we welcome that, of course, like with the understanding that we can't use every crazy idea that people put out there, and there will come a time where we say like, okay, no more crazy ideas, like we have to stick close to like what we're trying to do. But it any kind of creative work, and game development is creative work, and playtest is creative work. It's always better when it's a conversation and it's not one-sided. You want to make sure that everyone feels like the work that they're doing and the things that they're saying have value and that they're heard and that they're understood, even if they're not acted on. So it's really important that we read all the feedback that we receive and that we respond. We don't always have time to have like huge long conversations with people, but I think that we have enough time and that we take enough care that we build relationships between ourselves and our playtest groups. And we know specifically, like, we have some groups that are very, very in tune with the competitive meta and with tournament play, and we have other groups that just really love to play at the kitchen table and don't even know what a Swiss round is. And like all of that feedback is useful because different people play the game in different ways, and it helps us to be informed about like what we're putting out in the world and where it lands for different groups on kind of like a wide scale, because we can read Longshanks data and we can like read through the Facebook groups and the Discords, but it's very different from having like actual, like, someone writing down knowing specifically that they're speaking to us about what is coming, and with kind of a deeper understanding of what it is that we're working on because of the kind of insight that we get to share with them. It's a really interesting process for myself, at least, because it's kind of the first opportunity for us to see the impact of the work that we're doing, because we'll make something and we'll test it internally for a while, like 6 weeks or whatever, and then we feel like something's pretty good, and sometimes you put it into playtest and everyone's like, hey, yeah, this is great, I love it, and it feels really good because it feels like you got it in one even though you just spent 6 weeks on it. And then there's other times where you spent those 6 weeks on it and you put it into external and people are, it just tastes bad and it's not right, and you just wonder what you wasted 6 weeks on because you could have just started now. And every range in between, right? But like it is the first moment where we get to have that kind of feel of any kind of public awareness of what we've been working on, and that first, like, does it taste okay? And that's very exciting. And then from where it begins in external, it always gets better. And one of my favorite things to do when it's time to turn in new units or whatever is go back and look at version 1 and look at it versus the end and be like, wow, we got there. I think it's really cool. It's wild to me, even after doing it for years.
I bet it sounds like as a game designer, you kind of have to have some pretty thick skin because like sometimes you're just gonna like come up a little short on some of those, especially you like spend a month and a half working on something and it's all of a sudden you're like, oh, this did not hit the way that I was expecting to. So yeah, good. I mean, that's it's interesting to hear like kind of like how that goes. So yeah, I mean, along those lines though, you said you've spoken of like a lot of challenges about making something work, and some of those hurdles in like design and the function and unit functionality of the in-game play. So how is it like is it difficult to like stay true to like the functionality of the game as well as the Star Wars character and like the narrative of the lore of the character? Like how hard is it to balance those two?
Sometimes it really depends on what you're doing, right? There are a lot of characters in Star Wars that we think of in certain ways, like Ahsoka Tano. You know, you often think of Ahsoka Tano as being very like defensive fighter. You know, you look at the Ahsoka Tano Jedi No More card, and it's got abilities like Fierce Protector, and we just kind of think of her as wanting to keep everyone that's with her safe, but it is a game about running around and hitting people. I mean, at the end of the day, like the actions that we have in the game are move and attack and things like that, combat action, excuse me. But you make an attack. So it can be difficult to try and get across any kind of idea other than like I hit people real good. But we're also lucky that we have all the great source material from the films, and we get to use those in the ability names. One thing that we sometimes hear people say is like, I wish the ability names were the same if they did the same thing, and that is true. Like that is definitely a choice that we made, right? Like it is easier if everything is just has kind of a generic name and it does the thing it does. But we really felt like the lines from the shows, the lines from the books and the movies and the TV and the whatnot, like really kind of help you remember who the character is and like what is happening in that moment that we're trying to represent. So we went with that and we stuck with that, and we think that that kind of helps us quite a bit to like make things work, quote unquote. Like making it work is very subjective, and it also depends on what you're talking about. Like, does it work? Does it function? Like, does it not break the game? Because that's like that's really rule number one. It has to not.
Yeah.
It has to function. And sometimes things just don't function, and sometimes we know something doesn't function because as game developers, and also just like anything you're doing, right? Like sometimes you write your chicken scratch for like your little project that you're going to work on at home or whatever. Well, we do the same thing, and we'll like write our chicken scratch, and like it doesn't work, but we know we can make it work. We know we can fudge it. And sometimes we get to playtest and we're like, yeah, but we'll fudge it, we'll make it work. And like those 6 weeks, we'll like go through and we know that we can do it, but we haven't done it yet, and then we forget and we put it into playtest and it doesn't function because we're human and we're doing the best that we can,
Yeah.
and that happens like very rarely. But like making it function is definitely like bar one. But like, does it work? Also falls into this question of like, does it mesh well with other units that exist in the game? Does it mesh well with existing playstyles that exist for this tag group? Is it fun? And fun again, completely subjective. But you know, we have different people in the office that think that different things are fun. So like, if one person doesn't like something, that the nice thing is that that doesn't mean that it's not good. It just means that like they don't like it. So maybe you get someone else to test it, someone else that's into something different, someone that likes a different kind of game. So yeah.
Oh, that totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. So I guess like maybe a little along the lines of like making something work. I know you've kind of talked about like making little touches to things to when you're doing these updates. When that's like your preferred method. Um, are there like times where that little touch is just not enough and you've gone little touch, little touch, little touch, and then all of a sudden you're just like, you know what, okay, we got to swing for the fences, let's just kind of tear it down and start from scratch?
We very rarely tear it down and start from scratch. Like I can't think of any. Or maybe R2D2 and C3PO from the Ewoks were like kind of a tear it down and start from scratch, but even there we kept a lot of the DNA. It's You don't want to start from scratch very often because like we just said, you think about all these things like, does this work with other units? Does it do these things? Does it do those things? Like, does it mesh well with the rest of the game? And sometimes part of it's meshing well with the rest of the game is the abilities that it has and the things that it does that maybe are not the strongest part of it. Like maybe there could be something that is like the weakness of a character, but is the reason that it works with everything else. And you still need to like figure out how to make this work with everything else. So maybe you don't take this away, but you add something on, right? Maybe you tweak it, maybe you change it. But like the idea of little touches is really just that like if you're looking at any complex machine, which a game is a complex system. and you're like, that doesn't work, and you change 10 things and now it works, that's great, but you don't know which change did it. You don't know, like, was it this piece that you removed, or was it this piece that you added in that made it work? And if we instead, you know, change one thing and let the clock go for a little while and see if it works, and if it doesn't work, we stop it and we change something else, and maybe we change this thing back, maybe we don't, maybe we try both changes, whatever. But you stop when the clock starts working, right? So that way we have this idea that we know what we have changed is kind of just enough that it's where we want it, even if it's a lot. Like, even if we had to change a lot, at least we did it slowly. You know, if you boil the frog slowly, and you get there finally, and then you don't notice that it hurts. Like, if you go in there and you just change everything and it's good, people are like, well, of course this is good. It does all this stuff. But we can do our own due diligence by, like, little touches, one at a time. Like, change this thing, see if it works. Great. It all works now. Everybody's happy. Ship it. Next thing. And there are, and, like, you can look through the update, and you can see there are a lot of places where we changed very little things, like an expertise chart here, an expertise chart there. And then there are places where people got new abilities, like Ahsoka Tano. Like, what are you going to do? Sometimes you need to throw a little sauce on top.
Makes sense. So I mean, has there ever been like a time where you just can't hit the mark? Like it just keeps on, like every time it's like, yeah, you're not there, and it's like, and you almost have to push it off to like, okay, you know what? We're just gonna have to wait.
I I think we've managed to, like, find it eventually on all of them, but there are definitely a few things in this update where there were, like, a day where we're piling on, like, little by little, and we're being so disciplined about it, and we're being so disciplined, and we get so frustrated that it's not working. And there were definitely times where, like, you know what, fine, let's try this. It's gonna break the game, but you know what, well, let's just see what happens. And then sometimes it doesn't break the game, and then you have the problem of trying to be like, well, okay, wait a minute. Now, is it this thing that changed it, or is it in combination with the other, like, seven things we've already tried? And you have to go back and, like, kind of, undo things you've done and try and figure out what's working. But every tactic has its place, right? Like, sometimes that moment of frustration is what gives you, like, the big splash that maybe gives you too much impact, but shows you that, like, maybe it wasn't as far off as you thought it was, right? Or maybe it just wasn't far off at all. It's a crapshoot, So there's no exact science to this, and you have to take risks and try things.
Okay, yeah, I mean that is a fair statement. It's interesting to just kind of see how like the evolution of it all, like how you have to kind of evolve your thought process when approaching each individual thing. Every problem is new, I guess is probably a good way to say it. All right. So talking about every problem is new. Like gameplay is constantly evolving, as players and as you as developers kind of innovate and evolve in your craft. What's one of those like internal innovations that like at Atomic Mass Games that has excited you recently? And can you share any like of your upcoming innovations that you're especially looking forward to?
I think the most, like, exciting, fun thing for me that we've been doing and what we've been working on is we've been working a lot on the Galactic Legends format that we did in the public beta last year, and then we had some playtest events at Adepticon this year for that. And the way that the order deck works for the Galactic Legend is very cool. They have a deck of cards, and they draw a number of them, and then they select based on the cards that they have, and if they also have their Shatterpoint card, then that card, like, kind of supercharges it. And that's just very fun. I love that kind of having a deck of cards and the combination of the two, and just kind of the gameplay that adds to that game mode has been really fun to explore. And just that whole project in general, like bringing the characters to Shatterpoint in a different game mode where they're kind of this really, like, souped up, terrifying galactic legend that you're teaming up with your other cadre player, and you're going at, like, that stuff's going to be coming together, and hopefully be released sometime later this year is hopefully the plan. But that's kind of what's been really jazzing me up lately is playing Galactic Legend stuff in the office.
Nice, nice. I mean, I'm looking forward to that, like kind of getting fleshed out because I know that on the MCP side of things that's been a big hit for some, like in some ways. So it's really, I'm excited to see that happen because I know at Adepticon, Schick was talking about like a couple of different items, kind of going down the idea of different modes of play. He was talking about the only primaries fighting against others, and that sounded really exciting as well. So
It's always fun to have more ways to play the games that you love, and it's always fun for us to have more ways to build them out.
outstanding. Yeah, I'm like I said, looking forward to the new and exciting things that are in the future for Shatterpoint as well. So, okay, so like moving back kind of like to game design and character design, often there's like kind of like a push and pull between expanding the gameplay options and keeping balance in line with like list building. And you kind of talked about not like wanting to expand your like the options of like list building and but still not overpowering things. Like for example, one of the things that you did like with Vader, Vader Jedi Hunter was changing his identity so that it was only impacting the Galactic Republic and Galactic Empire instead of just being global. So how do you balance kind of that idea, that tension of between the balancing like the gameplay along with like balancing the list building?
Yeah, it's hard. We talk sometimes about how the tag system doesn't want to say no, but it does want to say thank you for playing. So when you make a decision like we did with Vader, where we had to kind of rein in his sphere of influence. It's tough because you have your brewers out there, right? People talk about your brewers who want to make weird lists and do wacky stuff, and you're taking options away from them. You're putting restriction in, but it's also true that restriction breeds creativity. Um, the kind of like perfect dream of a game meta that I'm not sure actually exists, but I always talk about it. It's like my great white whale is this self correcting meta where hopefully, something is very good. So someone plays something dark horse that is good against that, and then all of a sudden that becomes the top thing because it's beating the top thing, and then someone has to figure out the dark horse that beats that, and like where does that come from? And like the truth of the matter is that like the games aren't necessarily wide enough for that to be the case, but that's the dream, right? The dream is that there's enough going on in the game that you can counter it with something, not necessarily that it's like rock paper scissors, but like maybe if you throw in another like 7 to 10 options and there's something good against each one, right? Like it's why MOBAs are popular, is because like little things that change your game plan, right? Like that's the dream, and I'm not sure that that's really achievable in this kind of game, but it's kind of what we want to shoot for, right? Like balance is important, but balance isn't perfect, and it's honestly, I think it's a little more interesting and a little more important to make sure that people are having fun and that they're doing exciting things, and like whether that wins them the game or not should not be the main concern every time that you're designing something or developing something, right? As long as putting it on the table and going through the motions of like doing the thing that it does is enjoyable, and that there is some result and some reward for that gameplay. The reward doesn't always have to be that I win the game. Sometimes the reward can be that like I wounded more units than my opponent, or I took back every point that was taken away from me and somehow lost the game on this other thing. Like whatever it is that your goal is. Sometimes when I'm talking about, trying to get better at games, I talk about self improvement, and like comparison is the thief of joy. So I don't need to be as good as the best player, but I need to be better than myself last time. And like sometimes there's just that joy of like this character is difficult to play and like difficult to execute and not even very good, but I executed their plan and I did it well, and that was satisfying. That was fun. I mean, like executing Thrawn's game plan, whether you win or lose, can feel very satisfying and fun because you used the cards in the right way on the right units that did a thing, and like you lost the game, but during that one pivotal turn you got your minor victory, whatever that is. Like those things can exist in a game, and those things can be fine, and you're not creating imbalance by making something that doesn't win all the time, and you're not creating imbalance necessarily by making something. I mean, yeah, you are creating imbalance if you make something that wins all the time. Like that is the definition of creating imbalance. But it's okay to have something that wins frequently. Like that's something that has like that 55% win rate. Like That's not outrageous. That's within like that's okay. That's okay. That can happen. It's fine. And especially like when you're looking at win rates and percentages, especially for a miniatures game, like those numbers are so skewed, and they don't accurately represent everything. Like you can look at them specifically for events, and but even there, like you have a specific mindset of player that is playing at events, that is building lists for events, that is playing in a specific way, and then there's like different levels of skill disparity, and like anybody can play at that event still. So there's skill disparity between those players and players that are playing this that lose because they're just not as good of a player or they don't necessarily know what they're bringing. Like there's so many angles to that kind of data that makes it really tough to look at and understand perfectly. But like balance can't be perfect and we're never going to have enough data to know that we did it right. So I think our primary goal is and should be to make it fun and then
Mhm.
try our best on the balance and just realize that we're going to mess it up sometimes. And as long as we come back and try and smooth it out, that's the best that we can hope for.
Yeah, and that's it's nice that as a company and as an organization that you're willing to revisit that on a consistent basis of like looking at okay, what is not working, what can we do to fix things, even something as like small as like when you did with the Bo-Katan update,
Hmm.
and the Clan Kreese update of just giving them the extra errors, like so that was a small fix that like just happened immediately that you were able to sit there and do.
Yeah, well, with that one specifically, like we had the armorer come in and we were like, well, it'd be really cool if we could play all Mandalorians. Like that would be the raddest. And then we looked at what existed and we looked at the show. And we said, well, I mean, there's Bo-Katan and some Clan Kryze Mandalorians right there. Like this makes sense. This fits, and it lets you do this really awesome, cool thing that is very strong, and it does well in games, right? Like
Right.
everyone's afraid of all Mandos, but like that's the prime example of saying like it's okay to do the thing that's fun and awesome, even if it is going to win some games, even if it's going to be a strong thing. Things are allowed to be strong. People are allowed to have fun playing that thing that is strong. I think there's kind of this I, this is just this wrong idea, but sometimes I feel this way when I'm talking about games. And there's what's competitive and there's what's fun, and like why can't they be one and the same? Like why can't the competitive list be the fun list? It's not a dirty word to like play something that's fun that you like, and it's not bad to win games. I think sometimes like we get caught in this idea of like I'm a competitive player, so I don't play the fun thing. I play the thing that wins. Like no, play the fun thing that wins. Or like
Yeah.
I'm not a competitive player, so I don't play things that win. I only play things that are fun. Like I mean that's cool, bro. But you know what else is fun? Winning games.
Yeah.
So play the things that's fun that wins. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's okay to want to win, and it's also okay to like want to play the thing you like, and it's okay for that to fluctuate day to day. Like sometimes I really
Yeah.
am playing because like sometimes I had a bad day and I really just want to win a game because winning feels good in my tummy, and I will play something different in whatever game I'm playing that night than I will necessarily play on the night when like everything's going hunky dory peachy and I just want to like do something silly. It can change. We contain multitudes.
Oh yeah, no, I literally lived that like at post Adepticon. I went to a tournament, or we were playing in my leagues, and I was just losing to Mandos and Mandos and Mandos. They kept on beating up on me, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go to this tournament and play Iden, and, and it was just so yeah. You can just go back and forth. I think there's nothing wrong with changing, adapting or changing from week to week. I mean, we're not like being the same person over and over again is pretty boring.
Truth.
So yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, and this you said something else that kind of like made me think of something where it's okay, like the little wins, like there you don't always have to win everything. Sometimes like just having a small win is good. I have a newer player who has been just learning to play the game. He hasn't even won a single struggle. I played against him the other night and he won a struggle for the first time playing against me,
That's
and that
awesome.
was and that was like for him that was a good moment. So it's like sometimes just you got to look at those little wins, I guess.
Yeah, and like I don't know, the idea of focused practice is really big for me. I play fighting games for for video games, and like that idea is very much in there, and it can apply to playing Shatterpoint as well. Like if you sit down at the table and you just say, I'm not going to miss a single revenge trigger this game, not going to miss a single one no matter what. I'm not going to miss an opportunity to use coordinated fire. Even if I don't want to use coordinated fire, every time that I can use coordinated fire, I will use coordinated fire. When I make an attack that's within range 5 of this unit, I will use coordinated fire. And that's your goal for the game. If you don't miss a single one, you won the game. You did great. That's
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Because then the next time that you play, every time that you could use coordinated fire, you're going to see it, and you're not gonna, like, you may not windmill slam it because like that's the dumb thing to do, but like during that one game you did, so that you never forget it again. Like that's focused practice that makes you a better player. And then those are the things that let you play kind of the off meta weird wacky thing, because you're so versed in all of the interactions and what is happening that you don't miss a beat. And like that's, to me, that's how you become a competitor. Like because you're competing with yourself week to week. You're competing with yourself game to game to say like, how do I get better? How do I be the best plumber at playing Shatterpoint, at playing this game, at doing this thing? Because everyone's different and everyone has different strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. So self improvement, I think, is probably like the best way to say look at it, is like just improving yourself in a different aspect of the game, or you can take that even more
Anywhere
in a
in life,
larger
right?
anywhere in life. But yeah, that self improvement on a daily basis is, or weekly basis, what have you, is definitely like an important factor that I think everyone needs to take. Just like I said, like you were saying, life wide, not just in the game, but you can take the lessons from Shatterpoint, I guess, and apply them
Yeah.
as needed.
Don't take life advice from me. Game advice, maybe. That's
Maybe.
still that. Even that, probably not.
So a new weekly episode with Plumber life advice. That's what we're going with.
Yeah. Let's do that. Let's do that. Get with Ross.
Fantastic. Plumber and Ross life advice. I like it. Let's do this. Let's do it. Uh, so okay, getting back on track, I guess. Shatterpoint, like you release like these squad packs. They're designed to work together straight out of the box. When we're looking at like the process, sometimes looking at like the wider scale, like how things maybe interact outside of the box, what does the process look like, making sure that like the characters and abilities can be integrated not just inside the box but outside of the box with like the wider roster of characters that are available?
It really depends on the unit. Sometimes it's very easy. Sometimes it is very frustrating, because sometimes you come up with like a really cool idea, and it's just like too insular. And I think that we can talk about it with reference to like the Inquisitors. So if you look at the original incarnation of the Inquisitors versus where they stand today after the update, there weren't a lot of changes. Like there were some sizable changes. Don't get me wrong. I think they had bigger changes in some things, but like the actual number of changes weren't huge, and there weren't like huge scope changes. But like I think the biggest change, really, if you want to think of them as like a tag group that you would play a bunch of Inquisitors, is that the Grand Inquisitor's his identity opened up and allows him
Mhm.
some more play with the other Galactic Empire stuff. Because like if we look at the Inquisitors the way they were originally, like they're cool, they're interesting, but they're very much reliant on there being Inquisitors on the table, like together doing stuff,
Yeah.
and Force users across the table for them to beat up. And those things are not always true, and so you kind of run into this problem where even though they're a cool idea and they're thematic and they're kind of neat, they don't do anything because they don't play well. Number one, they don't play well with the other things in their tag group, the Galactic Empire stuff, and then number two, like they're they're like oil and water. With like if they didn't bring any force users, like what do they do? They move and they attack, and that's it. Like that, there's your game plan. So that that's not great. um, so sometimes it's really frustrating because you don't foresee that, you don't think about it, but then other times, we have the benefit of the fact that like other stuff has come out, right? So like Inquisitors were designed very early. We didn't have the other stuff from Galactic Empire yet. Like we didn't have stormtroopers, we didn't have snowtroopers when we started working on those. So like we didn't know necessarily what the themes of Galactic Empire were going to be and what was going to be good in Galactic Empire and like how to make it work in that way. And so when we did something like Delta Squad, which we haven't like shown or talked about very much at all, but like just I guess a little sneak peek into the process on them. Like we had some really cool ideas on Delta Squad, and then we kind of had the design down, and we played some games with them, and we're like, yeah, these slap. And then we kind of looked at them, and they're like, yeah, but they don't do much with other clones. So that was like a big moment where we had to like pull back. And when you see the cards for those, when we finally get to show those off, you'll see that they mesh well with other existing Galactic Republic stuff. And making sure that that stuff fits in is really important, because you want to make sure that the new thing is not like just the new thing. It wants to play well with the old stuff, because the old stuff is maybe someone's favorite character, and like they shouldn't get punished because their box came out first, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. And like, we can talk about doing a balance update is great, but like you have to wait for a balance update. So anytime that we can catch it ahead of time and say like, okay, how can we make this backwards compatible? Like that's great.
Mhm.
And it's difficult to do sometimes, and it's frustrating to do, and sometimes you have to kill a darling. Like something was really cool that you came up with, but you have to take it off the card so you can fit something that makes sure that it plays well with others. But like that's important. It's really important to make sure that all your kids are playing together.
Yeah, or sometimes like maybe going a little too hard on something that's cool, like Defiance will be the death of you, like
Hmm.
some because that kind of like was a little overtuned by just giving a free hit every time to anything that
Yeah,
was.
and yeah, it was. It absolutely was for sure. Like I think that I think it's completely fair to say that Gideon Hask, like Defiance will be the death of you was too much, and that the
Mhm.
ISF were definitely doing too much damage, like straight out of the box. Like that stuff went to print, and it was too strong. And I could tell you like what happened with Gideon is we didn't necessarily consider the weight of that extra strike, and how it didn't take into account the fact that like anything to do with like the number of dice that you would normally roll, or what your normal spread would be, or how many you know successes you should normally get. Like we did not properly account for that and equate for that, especially as it had to do with things like Vader and Iden herself, and like other
Mhm.
primary characters. So, again, like light touches, we tried just making the person be within range of Gideon, and that wasn't quite enough. And we said, okay, like this just can't be on these big characters. It's too much. They're already super consistent. They're already super strong. We already know that primary units are strong. We don't need someone else that just says like, hey, they're even better. And like that was you could say it's an oopsie, but when we were testing it, the other thing to remember is that like when you're testing things, you're testing it around things in that same kind of area, and like stuff that comes out around the same time maybe doesn't struggle as much against it as like their early stuff does, right? So like,
Mhm.
maybe Mandalorian doesn't struggle as much against Iden Versio as like Anakin Skywalker does, and I think that that's a completely true statement. Well, guess which two were play tested kind of like around the same time, Mandalorian and Iden Versio, and like that's again, that's part of that power creep that is going to naturally exist in games. Is like when you're testing stuff that you're trying to make sure is like new and exciting and cool, it's testing against other stuff that you're making that's new and exciting and cool, and maybe it's better balanced against one another than it is against the early stuff. And that's where these updates come in mind. And also just like where we have to just know like we missed a little bit, right? And I think it's completely okay to miss a
Yeah.
little bit, because no one does everything perfectly every time, and you just learn from the lesson and you move forward. And like
Okay.
we won't make another supporting unit that does 8 damage out of the gate with a potential other one from a condition for a total of 17. Like that might, maybe that's too good.
Potentially. I
Yeah.
mean, unless in potentially. So I mean, I guess that kind of brings a different question to me, where it's like, does that, because of like some of those little, as you said, oopsies, does that impact kind of how you interact, and maybe some of the requests that you have of like playtesters when you're looking at, hey, we internally only test against these things. Do you go to your playtester and say, hey, is it possible you can kind of reach out and like maybe test this with against older stuff and stuff like that?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of the times where we'll ask the playtesters like, "Hey, can you play this against core box stuff?" Or like, "Hey, can you play this against X, Y, Z?" We don't often have to do that, but sometimes we'll pull that out. Or like, if we know that we're going to change something, like as we were leading up to do the work on the update, and like we knew that we're going to tone down ISF. Like I'll tell you, there's a ton of playtest reports where people are like, "This stuff's really good," and you look at the rest of the list, and it's like they're playing it with Iden Versio and Gideon Hask and ISF, and then we have to look into the report and be like, okay, well, is it Gideon Hask and ISF that are like winning this game for them, or is it that this thing is new? And like when you know that it's a problem, and you know that you're going to be looking at it, the update that's upcoming, but like you can't fix it now, it's tough, because like you don't want to tell the playtesters like don't play the thing that's live, but also like we know we're going to change it, we know we're going to fix it, but we don't know what it's going to be yet, so it's not super helpful. So sometimes we do have to kind of like say, hey, play this against XYZ. And one thing that we generally tell people is like try and play new stuff against locked stuff so that you're not playing like new stuff against new stuff. Sometimes, it happens where like one person's really excited about playing new things and so is the other person and they play the game. And like that's fine. But we get a little bit better feedback generally if we're playing something that's locked. Specifically something that's like really it's really great to get stuff from like that first like year of the game. If you play against stuff like that, does it feel okay? That helps to keep that power creep in check. And so yes, of course we have to make specific requests of playtests sometimes, but we try to avoid it.
It makes sense. All right. So one other thing I kind of wanted to ask about, and this is something that I think came from like a conversation from with Schick at Adepticon,
Hmm.
where he was talking about how the idea of the Ahsoka Fulcrum and the Vader 3 version that box came, where he was basically just sketching out like something, and it kind of evolved, and that started the idea of that con exclusive box. So how do you go from taking a concept from like Dallas to like developing the idea and basically get into the final with like the models and the rules and stuff like that? How does, I mean, especially since Dallas isn't really a developer. He's just but he's an amazing artist and everything along those lines. And I'm sure he's been in the game world long enough to where he knows how it works. But how does that like internally like work?
Yeah, so like I'm not really involved in those kind of early high level decisions of like what specifically gets made, but I've heard enough stories from Schick and Dallas and them of like how they make those decisions, and they're varied reasons for why we make something or why we choose something. Like maybe there's an anniversary coming up, or we just know that something is cool, and then other times it's something like this story that you're telling, where I've heard the similar story where Dallas was just kind of like sketching this thing out, and then started talking about the scene and the this and the that, and like, oh, we could make this, we could do a dual pack, and like these could be the poses for the characters, and then all of a sudden, you have this concepted out thing, and you're assigning it to a sculptor, and they're going to make these cool miniatures, and then it kind of goes. It depends on like it depends on when the things due and like how much time there is and like kind of any number of factors like how busy Chick is on any given day, like whether you just get a really fully fleshed out design brief that tells you exactly what you need to do, which is awesome when that happens. Like you just get Ahsoka Tano Fulcrum is this kind of character and should have these kind of attacks and do this kind of stuff, and Vader should do this and this and X and Y, and here's some cards that I wrote, and they have stances, and go playtest this and fix it, make it better. Like that's great, and that happens a lot of the time. With this one specifically, we had a lot of time, and we had been working on uh, so much Shatterpoint stuff, and I was sitting with Chick, and we just started having a conversation about like, okay, well we've got multiple versions of these characters already. Like, how do we make these ones stand out? Like, how do we make them different? Because this is such an iconic moment, and like this is a dual pack. Like these are like this is like the ultimate snapshot, right? Like this is right then, and the conversation just kind of goes from there and becomes very organic. And part of that is just that I've worked with Schick for a very long time, and so I'm feel very free like speaking my ideas with him and chatting, and like we've been working on so many things where we're like, well, what if this Ahsoka like just hits really hard? Because we always talk about how Ahsoka is this defensive character and or just like super impetuous or this and that and the other thing, and like we were talking about Ahsoka Tano Fulcrum, and we were like, what if Ahsoka Tano Fulcrum is like kind of the sum of all the lessons learned. And so like there's a little bit of Asajj on there, there's a little bit of Anakin on there, there's a little bit of all these people that she fought alongside and against in the Clone Wars, and all of like a little bit of the DNA of all of those characters mixed together that makes Fulcrum this brave stalwart warrior who is no Jedi and wants to redeem her master, and when she finds out she can't, she'll avenge him, which is so Anakin, right? Like this is very much like the Padawan becomes the master kind of moment, right? And then for Vader, we were like, well, we've got a couple primary Vaders. What if Vader was a secondary? Because like this is Vader wandering around to try and like do his master's bidding and like find the Jedi, find the few that are hidden, all this stuff. But he's not like on the Death Star in command. He's not the figurehead right now. He's out trying to assert control over the galaxy, What if we do that? What if we do something where Vader has these cool control abilities and where he can affect more of the battlefield? Well, he's still got to hit hard. Well, yeah, he's got to hit hard, but maybe he can do it in a different way, and maybe you're afraid to attack him, so he's got some cool stuff on his defense expertise, stuff like that. Like sometimes we have talks about the mechanics and the characters and the scene in the show, and like it all just kind of melded together. And then so like we had that conversation, and then I got the character cards and the design brief and everything, so I got to be a little bit of a part of the initial discussion on that one, which was really cool and very, very fun, and I was grateful for that opportunity. But then we take all of that and we just go through the normal process just like anything else, right? Like we start testing it internally and we play it with as many different people as we can. So we'll make sure that all the devs get a chance to like throw something down on the table if they want to play it, or even if they don't want to play it. Sometimes specifically when someone's like, yeah, it's not that interesting, be like, great, you need to play this, because we want to get all the different perspectives on things, right? Like especially if something isn't your cup of tea, we want to make sure that it's interesting, like even if it's not your favorite, right? And so we do all that, and then it made it into external, and then it changed and shifted so much from external. Like really, external playtest is the catalyst for everything, right? Like it's the moment where like it's make or break, and it's either going to stay this way or it's going to change, and we figure that out usually pretty quickly. And then it goes through all that. It goes through the editor and all that good stuff, and then it gets shipped off just like any other product. So, every all the process is basically the same every time. But we also just want to make sure that we give everything the proper, I don't want to say reverence because that's a weird word, but like the proper respect. We want to make sure that we're looking at everything and we're saying like for the person that this is their favorite thing in this IP, whether that's Star Wars or Marvel or whatever we're working on, like if this is your favorite thing, is this going to be your favorite thing? And like we want that to be true. Like if you love Ahsoka, we want you to love every Ahsoka that comes out. If you love Darth Vader, we want you to love every Darth Vader for all the many different facets of Darth Vader. And they can be like different versions of the same thing and still taste great, and that's cool and that's exciting. And like the opportunity to do that is kind of what keeps you coming to the job every day, right? Because like that's the fun part. The fun part is making the cool
Yeah.
stuff. And there's plenty of, I always say like it's all games, but it's not all fun because there's plenty of paperwork and there's plenty of like editing and proofing and all that boring stuff too. But yeah, when you get the chance to like sit down and do the cool part, that's the best part of the day.
Awesome. Well, I think that kind of like wraps up a lot of pretty much what I wanted to talk about. Like I said, I didn't really want to dive too much into the update because you did talk about that quite a bit already with like different other individuals. So I definitely wanted to kind of go a different route. But I mean, I guess with all of the different podcasts that you've been on and everything along those lines, was there a message that like maybe you wanted to get out that you hadn't been able to get out in regards to like where you are, where the game is, or anything like that?
I mean, I guess I've said it on a couple of the other ones, but really just like thank you for playing, thanks for enjoying the game, and we hope that you enjoy the update. We worked really hard on it, and the playtesters worked really hard on it. It was a huge labor of love, and we're really happy with where the stuff has kind of shaken out. And we're really looking forward to. I said this the other day on another podcast, but like I think Monday morning is going to be the time when like I wake up and I get my coffee and I hop on Discord and I start reading through people's games for the weekends. And it's actually already starting to pop up now. It's Friday morning when we're chatting, and I'm starting to see where people are talking about like, oh yeah, I played my Inquisitors and they felt way more apt and able to do XYZ and like all this cool stuff, and people just enjoying their game. So, thanks for playing the game, and we hope you enjoy the update, and have a great weekend and get some games in if you can.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate that. For all our listeners, thank you for tuning in and spending some time listening to us. As always, we appreciate you guys. And I guess I'll just sign off and say, may the force be with you.